Hey there PCC, Mary Cristelli with Wellness and Recreation, back with another virtual workshop. Today I've actually got some company with me. I'm so thrilled. I've got a couple of the Wellness and Rec team members. So Mickey is actually going to do some demonstrations, help us with some demonstrations for today's video. And then Caitlin is behind the camera filming for us. And so it's really nice to have other people here when I'm filming this. Usually I'm doing it by myself. So this is fun for me, and I hope it's fun for them as well. Today we're going to talk about functional training. And functional training is a very popular form of exercise. It's been kind of moving up in popularity over the last few years, and it's for good reason. So functional training is a modality of exercise that helps prepare the body and train it for everyday activities. We call these ADLs, or activities of daily living. And so these are movement patterns that involve like bending, pushing, pulling, twisting, squatting, hinging at the hips, just like things that are gonna help you get stuff out of the cabinet or stand up out of a chair. It helps train and prep your body for those everyday movements. And so it's a super beneficial form of exercise. It actually targets various different joint movements. So we'll start from the bottom. We're gonna try and hit the ankles, the knees, the hips, stuff that works through the spinal column, shoulders, which can be, these are all really easily compromised areas, shoulders, wrists, and elbows. So when we're doing functional training, we're gonna be moving through all of those different joints because they're all super important and equally important. So the benefits of functional training are that it can help reduce your risk of injury. If you have a history of injuries or you're recovering from an injury, it can help with recovery from that. It also helps improve your balance, flexibility, posture, and then just overall strength, as well as, again, helping us perform those general activities that we do every single day. Anyone should be doing and can be doing functional training. It benefits every single person. The earlier we start doing these types of movements, the better it's going to be for us, but it's never ever too late to start. Now, as far as what types of exercise different folks are going to do, it's going to depend from person to person. If you have a history of injury, you're going to be doing a few different types of movements, and you may not be using weight. Or if you're rehabbing an injury, you probably won't be using weight in that joint area. For example, if you've got a shoulder injury, one of those movements that we talked about, we mentioned, is pulling motions. So you might not be doing pull-ups or overhead presses with a barbell or dumbbells. You might be using a band instead of weights. If, and Mickey's gonna show us this, if you're doing some squats, so you might start out, if you're new to squatting or you haven't done it in a while, you might start out on a chair. So what Mickey's just gonna do here, she's gonna sit down in that chair and then stand back up. And so you might start with squats in the chair, or like she's on a bench, you can use a box or a stool, just anything. And then as you develop that strength and that comfortability with that movement, then she can step forward, and then she's just gonna do squats just like she's sitting back into that chair. It's just going to depend on what your fitness level is at, what your comfortability is. If she wanted to, she could add some weight if she felt comfortable and ready for that. We would want to make sure that she had proper posture before we moved on to that, and she did. But if she were having her knees come over her toes or anything like that, I would not, so if she's, her chest is parallel with the floor or anything, we would help her correct her posture first. And then we'd say, okay, now we think you're ready to add some weight to that. So it's just going to depend on where you're at. Thanks, Mickey. I really appreciate that. How often you incorporate functional training into your exercise routine, again, depends on you. I recommend trying to add 2 or 3 different functional exercises into your workout routine 2 to 3 days a week. But if right now you're working out 3 days a week and you've got 2 days that you're doing some sort of cardiovascular movement, so like riding a bike or using a rower or swimming or running or walking, whatever that might be, and one day is strength training, add a few of those movements into that one day. Don't overdo it. I want you to go with what's best and right for you and what feels best in your body. so that you feel like you're progressing in your own training plan at the best pace for yourself. Now, when we're looking at adding these functional movements into our exercise routine, and kind of what they are is that there are two components to it that we want to take into consideration. So the first is movement pattern, and the second are planes of motion. We're going to do a little bit deep dive into each of these, and we're going to start with movement patterns. And there are 5 different movement patterns. These are push, pull, squat, hinge, and rotate. And these are going to be different movements that work the different areas of your body. All right, so what we want to talk about are those 5 different movement patterns. So Mickey is going to go through one exercise for each. We are going to have her do a few other exercises for each movement, and we'll add those to the video so that folks can see the different options we have of functional exercises. And then we're going to start with a pushing motion. So this is where we're pushing with our upper body, our body away from the floor. So Mickey's going to demonstrate a push-up. We've got a couple different ways that we can do a push-up. This is a full plank push-up. When we're in a push-up position, Mickey's got really great form, so she doesn't have her hips dropping down toward the floor. So we don't want that, where we have like an arch in our back. And she also doesn't have her hips piking up toward the ceiling. She has a nice straight line down her spine, which is what we want. And so she'll do a push-up in that position. This might not be at where some folks are at, and that is totally okay. We have the modified position, which is where we just drop our knees down to the floor. And again, so Mickey's got a nice straight line, so she doesn't have her hips dropping or piking up. She has a nice flat line in her back. The second we have is a pull. So we've got a kettlebell here, and what Mickey's going to do is it's called a high pull. So she's got a nice wide base in her feet. That's for stability. So she's just going to pull straight up. So she's got a nice straight spine. She has her shoulder blades rolled back. Again, like I said earlier, is that these kinds of movements can help with our posture. And so we see Mickey does not have her shoulders rolled forward or anything. She's not arching her back. She's got a nice straight spine. So one of the ways that we help correct our posture if we're concerned about that is that I recommend that you roll your shoulder blades back like you're hanging your armpits on a coat rack, and that can help you straighten up your upper back. The other thing that you're going to want to do is kind of tuck your pelvis forward, so you'll roll your hips forward slightly and engage your abdominal muscles, and that will help keep you from arching your low back. So that's our pulling motion. Then we've got a lunge. So this we're doing for that squat. So a lunge is considered a squatting motion. Mickey's starting with a forward lunge. You can see in a lunge position, so one thing we want to make sure of when we're doing any kind of exercise is that we're emphasizing correct form over speed or weight that we're lifting. We want to have nice, good form. So Mickey has great lunging form. Sorry, I can tell you. I'm not trying to balance. She's got her front knee right above that front ankle, and that's where we want it. We don't want to have our, you can stand up if you want. She's shaking. When we're in any sort of squatting position, we don't want to have our knees over our toes. We want them behind the toes, ideally with a nice 90-degree angle like Nikki had. So she can lunge forward, where she's stepping forward into a lunge. If you're new to lunging, haven't done it in a while, and you're wanting to build up that strength, that I would recommend doing a reverse lunge as opposed to a forward lunge, is that sometimes in a forward lunge we have a tendency to step too far forward. But when we step back into a reverse lunge, we tend to go back to where it feels natural for our body. So that's one of the squatting movements. And then we have a hinging motion. So this is our fourth, I got lost on my numbers, the fourth one. And this is where we're hinging forward at our hips. So a really common one that folks would think of is a deadlift, but what Mickey's gonna actually show us is a kettlebell swing. So she's gonna grab this kettlebell. If you don't have a kettlebell available to you, you also can use a dumbbell, but we're gonna use a kettlebell because it's fairly common and folks know that. So what she's doing with this movement is it's generated from the hips. Sometimes people think the kettlebell swings are powered with our arms, and they're not. It's a hinging motion with the hip. So she's gonna swing, drop down into like a sort of a mini squat, and then as she comes up, she's gonna power through her hips and thrust her hips forward, and that's how the weight is gonna move. Yeah, just like, good job, Nikki. And she's not muscling it up. Yeah, we'll have her turn to the side so we can see. So if you see her, the power is coming from that hinge in her hips, and she's actually using her lower abdominal muscles at the same time. This is a really good compound movement, is what they call them, because it involves multiple muscle groups. So that's an example of a hinging motion. And the last one we have, our fifth movement pattern, is a rotation. So that's going to be twisting. She's going to sit down on the floor and do, again, super common one. They're called Russian twists. So she can do this a few different ways. She started with her feet up off the floor. And so what she's going to do is she's just going to twist from side to side. And she's working her core. So we're seeing that twisting happen at her obliques, which are the muscles in her abdominal cavity that run in a rotational period. That might feel a little bit like not your level, or you might be like, you know what, I'm a little tired today, my abs are a little sore, I don't want to pick my feet up. So you can drop your heels down on the floor just like Nikki has her heels down, and you can do the same thing. What we want to make sure, as with any movement, like I said earlier, is that we want to have a nice spine. So if you notice, she's sitting up straight, she's got her chest open. Sometimes we tend to collapse and like hug our shoulders. Yeah, just like this, hug our shoulders in, and we don't want to do that. We want to have a nice opened up chest. Those are the 5 different movement patterns. Again, push, pull, squat, hinge, and twist or rotate. The second component to functional training are that we want to move through the 3 different planes of motion. So those are the sagittal plane, which divides the body into left and right halves. Then we have the frontal plane, which cuts the body in the middle from front to back. And then we have the transverse plane, which chops the body into top and bottom. And so we want to move through all of those different planes of motion, because by moving through the 3 different planes of motion, we can guarantee that we're going to get all the different angles that our muscles have. A lot of times when we have injuries and stuff, it's because we have muscular imbalances or weakness. That's one of the reasons why we can end up with injury. And so by doing movements through the different planes of motion, we work the different sides of the muscle so that we're reducing the likelihood of having those imbalances. So if we're working the front and back, we also want to work the outside and the inside. So the sagittal plane, which again, this can get a little bit confusing, which again splits the body into left and right halves, is Mickey's going to be moving through that plane by stepping forward and backwards. So when she was doing those lunges, she's working in the sagittal plane right now, because she's working with those left and right halves. So going forward and backward is going to catch that sagittal plane. Other movements like extension and flexion, so a bicep curl for coming up and down, that's going to be another sagittal plane movement. The frontal plane, which again is front and back, can you turn to the side? If she's from the side, it just comes straight down from like the middle of her toe to the top of her head, and it puts her body into front and back halves. What she's going to do for those movements, and you can face the front, okay, is go, you're doing a great job. Thank you. Is go from left to right. So she'll do side to side movements. So she could do side lunges. She could do lateral raises. That is a pulling motion that works her shoulders. So that's going to be the frontal plane. We want to make sure we're doing that as well. So we call those lateral movements. And then we have our transverse plane, which is top and bottom. And that is going to be those rotational movements. So she could actually, this is where it gets kind of fun, is you can throw the different planes into one movement. So Mickey could actually come down into a lunge. She could hold a dumbbell, so she's working in her sagittal plane right now. And she's holding that, she's got that kettlebell. And she could do rotational, she could do like twists. And she's gonna be working her core, and she's working her balance in her lower body at the same time. And I like that. She switched, she wants to even it out on both sides. So if you're doing something like that, you wanna make sure that you're getting both sides. So that is functional training, sort of in a nutshell. I hope you have a really great day. Take good care of yourself.